Hey everyone, welcome to the Spiritual Underground Podcast. This is your host, Dan. If you're just stumbling upon this podcast for the first time, we are primarily a 12-step recovery podcast, but I do like to explore ways in which anyone and everyone finds their true self. I think, I haven't said that in a while, that definition of recovery that I like is to find that which was lost or stolen. In most cases, what we have lost, as my guest here in a minute had pointed out to the nurse that was just in here, Darren put it in words of we'd lost our connection with God. For those people that kind of shiver at the God thing, we've also lost connection with our actual inner self, with the actual core of our being, our essence, our soul, our spirit. And that's why we talk about this being a spiritual program, is that, I look at it as being like working on the very spirit that's inside of me, not something that's outside of me. And so when I'm healing spiritually, it's my actual spirit that is being worked on, the spirit that makes day in, just like my thumbprint would be able to identify me. That spirit I have is not like any other. And so that's what we do here. We help people get in touch with the spirit, with their own spirit, find their true self, their true voice, and that's what we do here at Spiritual Underground Podcast. I'm here with Darren today. Come by and visit him. Christopher and I came by and visited him on Christmas Eve, and the fact of the matter is that I've had a little shortage of new guests wanting to come in and tell their story. So I'll do some, another thing that's tapped into as a result of my spirit healing is that my creative side can come a little bit more alive. So with that, we're sitting here today at Darren's room, and we're going to do some talking. We really don't have a particular topic. Darren had brought up a couple things, but one thing that I've realized about myself is I have no lack of words. I can see now why God put this podcast in my hands, and we juice things up, it's just the way it is when I get together with my buddies that understand this plane that we live on today. There's no end of conversation, there's no running out of things to say. And everybody's got a little different angle on how these things are presented in their life. So I know a couple of the things that you was talking about. How you doing tonight, Darren, first?
Oh, I'm doing great. Doing really good now.
I could see when I walked in, the light in your eyes, which is another thing you see in the big book. It said the thing that he could see the deal in their eyes, and we can see that in one another. And I saw when I first walked in, I saw that right off, that your eyes were bright, and not always is that the case, right?
Yep.
Just to get rolling, one of the topics that you had talked about before, and it's hit me a couple times, and just since you mentioned it to me the other day, was the line in the big book that says selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our problem or troubles? Troubles. I brought my big book with me because in case I needed to actually grab it and make sure. The root of our troubles, and one of the things that I see a lot of people struggle with is just the difference between what those two things mean: selfishness and self-centeredness. And another miracle of recovery is that Dan no longer has to think he knows what everything is. I love that I can say, I'm not sure, I don't know. There's a part of my life where I thought I had to know everything and have the right answers, and then would really be down on myself if I A, didn't know, or B, I was wrong. So what in your words, what's the difference between selfishness and self-centeredness?
Well, before we started our podcast, one of my nurses come in and she was asking what our podcast was going to be about. And Dan said it was going to be about recovery, and she has some background in that. She has some family members, and so Dan had mentioned when we started that I used the word God Normally I would just say, my inner self, or my, inner wisdom or inner knowing or whatever. But with her, I felt it necessary to say that word, and she related to that word. But what happened was, Dan and I shut up, like we know to do, and let her talk. And in her talking, she was discovering truths about herself, because we were listening and lifting her up with our energy. And there was one point in the conversation where she stopped and said, "This is really deep," because she was telling us stuff that she normally wouldn't tell people. And it's in the listening, and that's the difference between self-centeredness, or that's the solution to self-centeredness. It's getting beyond that, getting past the ego and reconnecting. In this instance, Dan and I connected her with our energy to her inner knowing, and she was able to figure some stuff out, because by the end of it, where she was upset with the person, she realized that she was the one that needed to look at herself. And that is why I do this. The number one discovery that I found was the number one healing tool that I use to this day is to listen to other people. When they're talking, I listen, and my only intent is for them to heal. And I'm not really listening to respond. I'm listening for them to get it out, because if you can get that energy out, the answers are inside you. I don't have to tell you anything. Sometimes I can pick up on your answers before you do, and maybe guide you in the right direction. But it's such a simple thing, is just shut up and listen and let them get it out. If you hear nothing of what I say today, if you want a good relationship or a good situationship, whatever that may be, that's a little inside joke there, whatever that may be, listen to the other person, not to respond, but just listen, to let them get it out, because they're suffering and they need to get that out. Now back to our regularly scheduled program on the difference between selfishness and self-centeredness. Everybody knows what selfish is. You've been told your entire life, you're selfish. If you're an addict or an alcoholic, you've been told that. But what's this self-centeredness thing? The way I describe it is, there's a song by Toby Keith. I can't remember the exact title, but it's "I Want to Talk About Me, Want to Talk About I Want to." Yeah. That one. That's self-centeredness. I just want to talk about me, and everything's about me. I remember when I first got sober, I was taking my dog out to pee, and that little sumbitch would sniff every frickin' tree in the whole courtyard where I lived, and he was just doing it because he knew it bugged me. That's self-centeredness. To a T, that's self-centeredness. Everything was about me. Even a dog taking the piss was about me. And, our whole country is self-centered. Everything, politics affects people, and the Democrats do this and it affects you. The Republicans do this and it affects me. Why? Why are you letting it affect you? Because you're tapped in or tuned in to that, rather than tuned in to your inner knowing, your inner wisdom. And the way I've found to get out of that self-centeredness, and that's more important, understanding what it is one thing, but how you get out of it, and that's through service, through giving, through listening, through making someone else your point of attention than you being the center of attention. Okay, you can talk for a while.
That's great, man. There's a whole bunch of things that run through my head when you're saying that. And it was cool that you watched somebody work it out, or at least work some of it out. It wasn't like she walked off and the problem that she had when she walked in wasn't there anymore. But there were some realizations that happened, and we had nothing to do with it.
planted.
We didn't give her any ideas, but when we like, it was kind of like that thing that I have to watch out for today. Even is trying to give somebody what I think they should do, or try to shed some insight on what this person was telling me and you, and to give that up and say, I don't know what the hell she ought to do,
Mm-hmm.
And there was a couple times where I was tempted to interject something along the lines of my experience of what she was sharing. But I bit my tongue and just shut up, and it was cool that she well, there's something about the answer is there, you just got to find it, and generally the answer is inside yourself. There's a couple guys that I'm listening to a bit on podcasts talk about, they got two words they're using. One of them is the dialectic, and one is dialogos. And much like self-centeredness and selfish, I'm not exactly sure I know what the difference is in it. But one of the things is that there is a learning process just in us dialoguing. That what we're doing here and what she did, and just having the space. And I think another human being is necessary in that, because you can't just do that to we know we can't hardly do that with ourselves, right? When I've done some solo podcasts, I've sometimes invited somebody to sit across there, and just so I would have somebody to yap at, rather than sit by myself and yap at the tools in the shop or whatever, because it makes it easier to talk when I have another human being in there to listen to me. I agree with the self-centeredness definition there, that's problem with it is, I can make somebody's self-centeredness be my self-centeredness, because I started getting bothered by this person making it all about them. And then I'm making it about me. I'm making their being about them all about me. Something else that I've noticed too, how I've noticed these, like, we've had a couple tragedies, and we've had the pandemic, and we've had like the tornadoes and some things like that I've noticed these people like take that on too. There's like a tragedy someplace, and they will voice it as if it was something that was actually personally, like they were in a tornado. Now if you were in it, you should have some reason. And I have no lack of compassion or empathy for the people that had to go through that, but I no longer take on somebody else's tragedy in that manner. In the 12-step world, I notice like there's some trickery going on, and one of the things we do, since we know this self-centeredness is a problem, and we know that service and putting your energy on somebody else, a whole bunch of what we're asked to do is focused at that. So when you're asked to put up the chairs at the end of the meeting, and and when we share, and we come together and meet, and you chair the meeting, and you do these service things, or we suggest that maybe you go out and do some service that takes that focus off of you and forces you to focus on somebody outside of you, and you put it pretty simple, that's the solution. And we don't really state it that simply when we're doing it. We just tell you, go do it. Shut up and go do it. I think coming to meetings helps break that at some level, because like what it does is when I go to a meeting, I can't tell you how many times I went in there with something on my heart, but somebody else shared and my problem got real small real fast. One particular time was when I remember I had a problem at work that day, and I really struggled, and I got in an argument with my boss, and it wasn't a terrible argument, but it was an altercation anyway. And I thought I had some, I was in early recovery, so that was a big deal to Dan at the moment. That quit being a big deal. And I came in, and a guy stuck his hand up for a burning desire and said that his brother was murdered last night. And for lack of a better way to say it, the hammer of God come down and hit me right on the head and made me realize just where my problem was today in the grand scheme of things. And it forced me to put my attention some compassion and empathy for another human being, which essentially all but relieved my problem. It didn't even exist anymore. That magic of us sharing in meetings. It's a jump in anytime. It's a hard thing to overcome, though. It's a survival skill in a sense. It's some of the dichotomies here of you're not going to get better until you're ready and willing to get better. But I'm not supposed to focus on me. You're self-centered, and we will hear some of that from people who are the loved ones of recovering individuals. Mm-hmm. Will see like a selfishness in their eyes will jack up, because now all of a sudden this dude or gal or whatever is spending all their time going to meetings, meeting up with other alcoholics, meeting their sponsor, and be called selfish or self-centered because all they're doing is focusing their energy on themselves, which at some point that's a requirement of this thing too. So,
well, at the end of the day, we in recovery realize that it's all driven by fear. So selfishness, I'm going to lose something that I already got. I ain't going to get something that I want. Self-centeredness, this is always going to be this way. Things are never going to change. I'm going to be stuck with this person drinking and drugging, and they're not going to do anything about it. And I'm going to have to be alone with the kids, and the mind can just race and create all these different scenarios if you let it. What we did tonight was there were a couple times when my nurse was in here, and she was sharing, and at one point she acted like she wanted some answers, so I went to offer an answer, and immediately she started talking again. And I've learned that especially with my sponsees, where I learned it, and later I could apply it to my wife or whoever, is people don't listen when they're stuck in ego mode or fear mode. So you need to let them talk, and every once in a while you throw a word in there, and they'll either start listening or they'll jump over top of you and they need to talk more. So you got to let them talk through that fear, and then I usually notice a change in their mood. They'll do an exhale or something like that, and then I can offer, and it's usually not much. Usually I'll just try to guide them into solving their own problem, but a key thing is when they're driven by fear, you got to let them talk themselves out. You got to let them expel that energy, and then their ears will magically open up. And you said it a minute ago. It's all about the compassion that's generated through listening, and I learned that from a Buddhist monk, but I learned it in AA meetings, because somebody would say something and I would relate to them, and my heart would go out to him, and that's what compassion is. And my heart was so out of practice when I got in here. It was like, my leg muscles right now, because I haven't walked in over 2.5 years, they're really weak. So if I try to stand up, I'm going to fall down. That's the way my heart was. It was really weak. It wasn't used to working, but it did work. It just took some practice, and I had to have a proving ground like AA, where I could be around people and where I had no history with them. I hadn't harmed them, because I'd feel guilty if I tried this with my family. So I would go spend, like you said, I'd spend a lot of time with these other people, but I was using these people, not in a negative way, but using these people to develop these new tools. And I could do so freely because I hadn't harmed them. And then later on, I was able to apply that to everybody. But
yeah, it's interesting that I always see guys come around and they know somebody in the group and they will instantly think that's the guy that they should work with. Fact of the matter is, the guy that's probably going to save you is a stranger. If you've got any kind of connection with somebody, and that's another, actually was one of the biggest reliefs I had in the very first AA meeting I went to was in my little hometown in New Albany, and I was scared to death that I would know somebody in that meeting. And I can't tell you, not even then did I understand the relief, because I remember the relief that came over me when I scanned that room and realized that every single one of these people were strangers to me. Because that allowed me to okay, I wouldn't have anything to hide. I don't have to act tough in front of this dude I went to school with, or we have learned behaviors with our family, and to just break them on start stopping those behaviors and doing new ones with an old audience is basically impossible. I got to have this new audience or this new support in order to be able to turn this page and exercise these muscles that are like your heart, and these recovery muscles that we have to begin to start learning to use. I didn't even have any idea those muscles existed, to be honest, until I started coming around here, and then for long, this time thing is hanging around, keep coming back. Our little cliches we say we'll do that to you. I don't know if you come to AA for a while, if you come to visit 12-step meetings, and I know a number of people that do it. I know people that can't put together any time. I know right off of my top of my head one guy who's been doing it for 15 years, and I don't think he's ever got a year. But he's a better person. He's better than he would have been had he not been doing that, I promise. And he's a really good guy. He just can't stay sober.
That's right.
And that's ultimately ends up being, it's another thing sponsees, new people want to assure you, that's Darren, I'm a really good person. Dan, I'm a really good person. I know you're a good person. I can feel that you're a good person, man. You're just sick. And part of that sick is not having known how to use these muscles that God gave you and were intended to be used. An inebriated, hiding, numbing, that's what another thing is. It's, all that stuff really is just numbing things. You're desensitizing yourself. Christopher would say that all humans have these same conditions we have. Alcoholics, we kind of set ourselves apart, and also, the damn book even says that sets us apart from other people. And then we love that because that gets us into that unique place we like to be, the terminally unique. They pet that terminally unique muscle, and you go, yeah, I am different than everybody else. But there is some truth to the fact that we feel things at a deeper level. Like our sensitivity to criticism is higher than another person. And our, all of our sensitivity meters. So then, when we overload, we can't handle it. So then we start putting stuff in us that will tone that shit down, and you don't have to feel as much. When problem is, like Brene Brown says, is when you numb the bad, you also numb the good. You can't do one without numbing the other one. And sponsoring new people, man. There's nothing that's better for your self-centeredness than to devote time to walking somebody through this work. There's nothing better that I have ran into in my experience. There's nothing better for me than to put your attention solely on the betterment of another human being or whatever, with that being your sole focus, knowing you're not going to get paid for it, knowing you're not going to get, you're not going to get any material goods out of helping this guy, but it definitely it's a, like we say, this thing isn't, we're never cured. I don't know if I'll ever be cured of self-centeredness, but by doing that, it keeps my self-centeredness at bay, and I don't eventually I begin to have a heart that thinks about other people more than it's worried about me. And that helps everybody that ever comes in contact with me. Helps my children, my parents. I'll run out of gas on that particular line.
In the big book, it talks about when we go to bed, before we go to bed.
When we retire at night?
Yeah, when we retire at night, we look at our day, and part of it says we ask ourselves, where have I been selfish today? Where have I been self-centered? Where have I been dishonest? Where have I shown resentment or anger? And where I've been afraid. And those are, I like the analogy that fear is like the mob boss, the Tony Soprano character, and then you got, I think the biggest henchman is resentment or anger, of course, and so does Bill Wilson. But then you got dishonesty. You know, if you need to hide from something, dishonesty is your biggest tool. Then you get selfishness, make you feel better. If I can control somebody and get something I want, well, that control thing, that's a big one too. But so those are the things that we watch out for, and then when it says when they come up, we ask God or the higher power to remove it. And then we talk to somebody about it if we need to. You know, sometimes, you know, when I pray about it, I can let it go right then. But if I can't let it go, then I call my sponsor, I call somebody and talk
share
about
it with somebody.
And then the part people forget is then we turn our attention to somebody else. That's when we can be of service, because you can't transmit. It's another word sentence that he uses. You can't transmit what you don't have. So sometimes I won't even answer the phone if I'm not in a good spot. If I'm in pain, I'm self-centered. I can't help but be self-centered because I'm afraid, because I'm like, I've been in pain before, and I know that it can last for a long time, and my mind will tell me I'm going to be in pain for the rest of my life, and so I get trapped in that self-centered ego world. And that's another thing, this ego that everybody talks about, and I talk about it. Show it to me. Show it to me. It's not real. There's nothing tangible that the ego is an active, functioning being. It's not. It's a collection of ideas. Most of them weren't even my own. They were conditioned into me. And I've taken on this persona. And the only way for this persona to convince you that it's real is through judgment. I'm better than this person. I'm worse than this person. Through control, through dishonesty. All these things are feeding this ego to make it it's like it wants to be like Pinocchio. I want to be a real boy. I want to be a real boy. And if I can just get you to believe all these things, I'll be in control. And that's alcoholism. When the ego starts to see, like if you're listening to this right now, and you haven't worked on your ego, it's going to tell you to turn this stupid shit off. I don't want to hear no more. Or it's going to listen, take notes of what I'm saying, because you ain't really hearing it anyway. You're off in your head thinking about what you're going to eat for breakfast tomorrow. But it's listening, and it's keeping notes. So when it comes time for you to start doing work, then it's going to jump on you. Then it's going to attack you. That's why these guys with 15 years coming to meetings, that ego will spit that big book out left and right, because it's heard everything that's ever been said about recovery in 15 years. So it can spout that book out for you and make you think that you're really recovering, when it's just using another way to pull the wool over your eyes. Or in the Matrix, they say pulling the world over your eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. you said something that caught me, and it's the first time I thought about it from that angle. This book says we can't transmit something we haven't got, which to me always meant like that I need to have like sobriety, recovery, and I wouldn't be able to transmit that unless I had it, right? And I think that probably is the context of what it is. But you were talking about keeping your mouth shut when somebody calls and you're in a bad state, And so when I'm also in a selfish place or I'm up in my head, it's maybe not a good time to talk to somebody at that point, because at the moment I'll be transmitting what I have. and there's a lot of, you make that judgment call all the time by looking at your telephone to decide if you're going to answer that or not. And I have a lot of reasons to answer the phone calls today. But sometimes I know it's just not the right time to pick up the phone for a particular reason. Some new guys calling me, and I'm just not feeling all that goddamn spiritual at the moment. And I'm like, I'm going to let that go to voicemail right now, because and I hadn't thought of that, about that line just reversed on me. As so many things in this program do, there's this dichotomy of so many things, like I was saying earlier about this being a deal where I really have to work on myself to get it. I do have to work on myself, but also at the same time I got to not be selfish and self-centered. and those two things don't really, they don't make sense that you do both of those. It's the one everybody knows, just surrender to win, right? How's that make sense? And also that transmitting stuff is not just there's not a check valve in there or something that keeps it from being one thing or the other. I can transmit crappy stuff just as easy, and if I don't have it, then I can't transmit it. I like that. I would say that we get in here, and one of the big ones that we talk about is like fear. That we must have fear. You have to. You'd run out in front of cars in the street and jump off of high places and do things like that, and it's again some of this dichotomy stuff of we'll have to learn how to direct our, to use our fears in ways that are healthy and not unhealthy, and that there's no better place for a problem than a mind in my head and me all by myself. Because we spin. It's like there's a momentum generating thing in fear that will ramp up into almost like a mania if I allow that to spin into the future, and that's the crux of like the one day at a time stuff, or the 1 minute at a time, or the be present where you're at right now. Those are the antidotes for me for things like fear and anxiety and that kind of stuff, because everything I fear, 100% of the things I fear haven't happened yet. It doesn't make any difference if it's in 2 minutes or 10 days or 3 years. It hasn't happened yet. I'm sitting here burning my energy fearing it, and it hasn't even happened. It's make-believe. I'm making up shit to be afraid of, ultimately. There's a likelihood that maybe something was, these things, if you start fearing that maybe your parent's going to die, well, there's almost 100% certainty that is going to happen. But it's not an almost. There is a 100% certainty that will happen. But I think about, like, I heard somebody say that, we get this measured amount of energy to spend every day. And to put it in computer terms, let's say we get 100 gigabytes every day that we get to burn. We wake up in the morning, and laying on your bed next to you is a brand new 100 gigabytes of energy. But we get to decide where we're going to burn that energy. And things like fear and self-centeredness and selfishness, dishonesty, all those things, they're not as efficient as certain other things like love, compassion, empathy. You get a lot more miles per gallon out of those energies than you do with like fear and dishonesty and that kind of stuff. That burns up your energy reserve, you know. So having awareness today, and to me it helps to think that way in these analogies like that. I don't know why, it's just one of these things. I don't know if it's like my engineering kind of background mindset and that kind of stuff is why it works for me. But it does work for me, and it helps me, you know, with my presence at any given moment of asking myself, is this a place where I want to use some of my energy? You know, and negative energy burns up my reserves, and I can be exhausted, and the day ain't done yet, right? And I got something else I got to do tonight, and I burned up 60% of my energy this morning on the news. Yep. And that awareness of being able to operate like that has helped me a whole bunch to think about it, just like the gas needle in my car. I have to keep an eye on where that's at, or else I'm on the side of the road buying a gas can, walking up the highway. I don't want to do that with my life energy. Flip side of that is, end of the day, I get no prizes for having a lot left over, right? So like that balance thing of like trying to make sure that energy gets, I want to use up every bit of it every day, because that's making the most out of my life and my hours of the day. But I want to use it up in the most beneficial and helpful ways. Whenever it's helpful for me, some days that means I got to take care of myself and not do much. Some days that means I need to pour a whole lot into some other people. Some days that's more of a balance, you know, and the awareness of those kind of things keeps me, I think that's ultimately the elusive word that we get pitched around a lot, and I just used it, balance. How do we find balance in our lives? And what not everybody, but it's tossed around a lot. I just got to find some balance.
Fear is, in my opinion, 100% the mind. You're talking about when you're like standing on a building and you're like on the ledge of a building and you feel this, you're going to feel this twinge, this pain in your stomach. That's not fear. That's your body telling you that you're in danger. That's how your body communicates with you, in the stomach. If you're surrounded by a bunch of little kids and they're laughing and they're playing with balloons and there's a bunch of little puppies, and you're gonna feel this feeling in your stomach, and they call it the warm fuzzies. That's your body's way of saying this is good. So you got good and bad, or good and danger, and that's how your body communicates with you. The Buddhists teach that, you know, if you're in the middle of a storm, and that's fear. Fear's the storm, like a tornado. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to the top floor, which is your mind? No, because it's more dangerous up there. You're going to go to the bottom floor, which is around your belly button. That's where your chi is, and that's where your energy center is, and that's what gets zapped when the mind creates these fear-based scenarios. It's taking away your personal energy, like you were talking about. And there was something you said that I loved. I like the fact that you said you can't, you get no rewards or awards for hanging on to it. But I don't hang on to it. At the end of the day, if I have anything left over, I will imagine myself sitting down with one of my friends and surrounding them with my leftover energy and feeding their spirit with that. And so I'm sending energy from my heart to their heart, and that's a better way to use that excess energy than to burn it up thinking about, you know, who's going to be president, or what law they're going to pass, or, you know, what's the price of gas, or how do I stop from getting COVID and shit like that. That's all mind. It takes us out of the present moment and takes us into the future, which is always fear. It can only be fear because you have no power in the future. And in the big book, it says lack of power. That was our dilemma. And then it says that we trust that a power greater than ourselves to restore us to sanity. So in my way of thinking, it's saying it's insane for me to go off in the future and give my power away when the only place that I'm ever going to have any power, or more importantly, ever able to use that power and give it away, is right now. What we're doing right now. And that's focused in the present moment. Let you talk about
my mind balked at the thought that the only thing that's in the future is fear. Like diagrams, sentences, and verbs and nouns and stuff. So I don't know what hit me like that. We were talking before the beginning.
You're right. We can create fear in the future, but through our imagination. We can create. We can create good too.
Yeah.
So, thank you for pointing that out, because I was.
Fear is only in the future, but the future is not only fear.
That's a good. You should write that down.
Oh shit! I just documented it on the podcast.
We're going to credit that to Dan from now on. I was talking to a guy the other night about meditation, and he's very newly sober, and I was asking about meditation, and he said, man, I can get 10 breaths in before I start thinking. And I remember saying to him, well, that fucking sounds hard. I don't think I'd start with that, because I tried that and I couldn't do any better than he got further than I did. But what I said was, why don't you, this was a couple days later, I'm like, why don't you sit down with your 2 kids and get some pencils and some paper and some colored pencils, and both of you, all 3 of you, create this fantasy and tell this story and develop it together. And not only are they creating hopefully they're creating a future that's positive, but they're doing it together, and they're able to connect through their love for one another and then their imagination. So you can do a lot of good in the future. It's just when you're newly sober, that's someplace that you should be going.
Place. Yep, you're right.
It's like the enemy grounds.
Yep. Certainly, some of those keystone fundamentals, as you're coaching somebody or whatever, mentoring them, sponsoring them, any of that, is that people call with these problems that are in the future. It's undoubtable, that they're projecting out there. We have this thing to go to worst case scenario. We have this leaning to do that. So we shoot out to the future, and there we place the worst possible outcome. And then we actually take that on like that is where we're heading, just like it's a for certain course. That is our course, and there's no stopping it. And quickest way to get over that, and I remember doing it, and I would just ask myself, I'd stop that crap, and I'd say, am I okay right now? I mean, like right now. Look around my surroundings. Where am I at? I'm sitting at work. Temperature's pretty good. Roof's not leaking. Nobody's hurting me. Not hungry. Go stretching. Car's payment was made. Everything around me is okay. And do a little inventory, like some, similar to where some people have people do a gratitude list on the spot. Do a little inventory of where I'm at right this minute. And every single time, the answer to that is, am I okay right now? Is yes, I'm okay right now. By that time of that little exercise, I can somehow or another detach from that outcome I was projecting and come back to where I'm at. and that being in the moment. I mean, Eckhart Tolle he nailed that, right? The power of now. It's a fundamental life skill is really what it is. It's certainly not monopolized by alcoholics or anybody with a particular problem. It's the solution to most of life's problems is it happening right now? Nope. There's a story Scott Lee talks about in one of his talks about a lady who was at a bank, and a robber come in and grabs her around the neck and puts a pistol to her head. And she somehow or another processed the fact, because they said, "Whoa, was you scared?" And she said, "No, I wasn't scared." And they said, "Well, how could you not be, scared?" And he said, "Everything that I would be scared of would have been in the future. He hadn't shot me yet. He hadn't hurt me yet. He hadn't robbed me yet. So right now, with the pistol to her head, things are okay because it hasn't happened yet."
Yeah.
Scott tells it real powerfully. He's one of my favorite dudes, man. I've got so much Scott Lee inside of me. I'll tell Toby a story. The other day, he come upon this all by himself too, because this is what recovery does. It gives you this awareness. If there's probably anything, if you hear me talk a lot, I'll say the thing I like the most, the number one thing, but it's all up there in the number one pile of things I like. It's just what I'm talking about at the moment. Is just the fact of that I get this opportunity to be aware of what I'm doing, because like thinking back, everything that was happening to me was so subconscious, and I was just like a victim of the catalyst that I bumped into. It was the proverbial pinball in the machine hitting off those bumpers that shot it off in another direction, and you never are sure which direction it's going. And now I can actually be aware and have some domain over my path. And Toby was talking about having all these using dreams. And it's hitting him. He's coming up on his year. And somebody mentioned the fact that he's in his 11th month, and that's always a dangerous month. A couple other projections was there. And then a little bit later, Toby comes in and he says, "You know what? For the past few weeks, I've been watching Intervention, the TV show, before I go to bed. And that shit it'll program you. You can't help but to digest and ingest the stimuli you're subjecting yourself to." I think it's another thing about being around people I minimize my time around people that won't bring some level of light to me. And he put that two and two together, that he'd been digesting that. Well, no shit, if you go to bed every night watching people shoot up, there's a likelihood that you're going to have those dreams. And that may seem pretty simple maybe to some of the listeners or whatever, but it was just a really good example of watching this stuff work in the life of somebody. I'm terminally unique enough that I think that this stuff is only happening to me. It was another awareness thing that when I got sober, I just thought, what a miracle is this happened to me? Like, I'm almost like the chosen one, and then my self-centeredness evaporated a little bit, and I started paying attention to other people, and it's happening to her too. It's happening to him. Oh, it's not just a fluke. You do this stuff, you take this prescription, or you use this recipe. Those are two terms I was saying in the beginning that have been, I'm sure you do it too. You get these concepts that bounce around in your head and not really sure why they're there. I heard one of the big guys talking about the penicillin. You've heard him too say that you don't have to know why penicillin works. You don't have to think it's going to work. And he goes through this whole thing. But if you take it as prescribed, it's going to work. And that's what our program is too. And I liken it to another thing is that you can't take 2 penicillin pills today. It says take 1 for 10 days or whatever it says. You don't get take 2 today and skip a couple days, and then maybe take 3 on Friday and skip a couple of days. That's not the prescription. And some people will come in at 12 steps and kind of try to take that prescription into their 12-step life too. That they'll do a little bit today, and then I'm not going to fool with it for a week or two. When Bill says this thing is it's a daily thing. It's hard to do on a daily basis until it sets in on how real this really is, living on this with this. But the prescription and the recipe thing are two really good parallels, and I like the analogies, similar to the analogy I used earlier, of that if you follow this recipe and you put the ingredients in it and you cook it for the right amount of time, it's going to come out like, if it's, let's say it's grandma's cake recipe, it's going to come out like grandma's cake. And you start playing around with it, you may get something better. Who knows, right? But when company's coming over, you want to take that chance? No. When the new girlfriend is showing up tonight for dinner, you'll be making sure everything on that recipe thing is to the dime, man, because you need it to turn out right. And it really is about how simple this program is. This is the line in there: simple but not easy. The following this prescription, which includes a whole lot of hanging around with dudes who already follow it, or gals, people, you'll end up having this thing that me and you got. It's not an if thing. It will happen. It's a beautiful. You couldn't have ever. I still remember the guy that on that first AA meeting, he looked at me with the biggest, brownest, softest eyes, and I'm not sure I'd ever looked into a man's eyes before and listened to him. And when he gave me that guarantee statement about, I can guarantee you that if you work these 12 steps, he said, if you have this thing I have called alcoholism, if you work these steps and practice these principles in your daily life, your life is going to get a whole lot better. And then he said, I can also guarantee you another thing. If you have this thing called alcoholism, this thing I got, and you don't work these 12 steps, and you don't practice these principles in your daily life, it's going to get a whole lot fucking worse, Dan. I wasn't prepared for that last. I was all KK when he's blowing the fluff up my rear end, when he dropped that other half of the guillotine. One of the other miracles of recovery is you get to have this crystal ball, and that guy's got one. And little did I know how right he was going to be, because I didn't. I had it, and I didn't do it, and things got a lot worse. It's a funny thing how it tends to get worse for people when they are exposed to recovery and decline it than if they're never exposed to it in the first place. I'm not sure if that's just because we get to see it. It's a belly full of beer and a head full of AA concept.
Oh, yeah.
That.
Yeah, when they start thinking that everything's good enough, it's better, a hell of a lot better than it was. So I don't have to work so hard anymore. I can do, I don't have to help that guy. There's other people that can sponsor. There's a hell of a lot of people that can sponsor better than me, and I don't have to go to these AA meetings. I just have to, spend more time with my family and
be a good dude.
Yeah, just be a good guy, and then
it's not enough.
Usually get better every time. I'm always open with my sponsees. I'm like, if you can figure out a way to smoke a little pot and not go back to your drug of choice, let me know, because if you can find it, we'll write a book, we'll make a bunch of money, we can both get high together and still be happy, Joyce.
Yeah.
If you can do it without going back, backsliding, let me know, because if there's an easier, softer way, I'm all for it, but I just ain't found it.
Yeah.
I just haven't found it. We're talking about fear, the whole world is against us. All the news and all that, that's nothing but fear-based scenarios. That's how they sell products.
Yep.
That's how everything. It's all about money. It's all about fear, and they can use money. They can use your fear to make money. And as long as church has been around, that's been going on. And now the news media is caught up, to what worked for them. Hey, we can make it work for us. And we buy shit that's not good for our bodies, and we use it to calm the fear down, or because they say this is the healthy thing, and then 5 years later that healthy thing's causing cancer. And it's all about, at the end of the day, it's money. And the easiest way to control somebody is tell them that the world's going to be a whole lot worse if they don't do this.
Yep.
Or your world's going to be a whole lot better if you do this. If you try this diet pill, that you're going to be more attractive to people, or whatever.
Use this shampoo and you'll have longer hair. Put this cream on your face and you won't get wrinkles.
Yep. The thing is here's the to me, the original sin is that we do this to kids who are a perfect example of being in the present moment, being happy, joyous, and free, and we fuck them up by using our fears and imposing them on and teaching them to them, and over time they get corrupted and corroded. And so you've taken this perfect, precious diamond and turned it to a piece of coal in just a few years, and it's sad. But the thing about recovery that I love is that diamond's still there. It's just covered up. And if you dig through the mud and the shit and crap and the gunk, and you might have to get a jackhammer from time to time, but you can pull that diamond out, polish it up, and share it with other people. But if you want to find or see how it's done, all you got to do is sit in a chair, keep your mouth shut, and watch your kids. Let them play. So if you just watch your kids play and quiet your mind, they'll show you how much joy you can have in the present moment. At Christmas Eve, after you and Christopher left, my wife and my daughter-in-law brought my 3 grandsons up and my dog, and I haven't got to hold my youngest grandson, who's 11 months old. I've only held him once at my son's wedding recently, and he was cranky and tired, and he didn't know me, and they just stuck him in my lap and kind of turned away from him, and he started bawling.
WTF?
But the cool thing was, you and I and Chris had built up this really cool energy going, and they bring the baby in, and he had just had some surgery on his privates, and they said he was grumpy, not in a good mood, and he was asleep.
He was asleep when they came in.
So after a few minutes, I'm like, let me see the baby or what? That's what I'm thinking. So I said, well, won't you take that carrier up here and just sit it in my lap and let me see the baby. As soon as she picked that carrier up, that baby woke up and he just starts laughing. I mean, laughing out loud, just giggling and smiling and happy. And so she takes him and sets him up on my lap, and he looks at me for a minute, and I said, don't go nowhere, don't run off and leave him. So he gets acclimated, and then he just starts pulling on my watch and pulling on my beads on my arm, and then the other 2 grandkids come over because they love their brother, and so we're just spending this all together, just watching this baby, and we're all connecting, and we're just seeing innocence and purity. And it's really hard for me to be like that, but it's really easy for me to witness it. I haven't got to the stage where I can just be so present in the moment that a bracelet can interest me, but I can be so present in the moment that a cute little spirit being so pure, and I can just be with that and witness at it and absorb that. That's the key. Connect to that energy. You talk about charging your batteries. That's a full day charge if you can just witness these kids being happy, joyous, and free, and innocent and pure, especially if they're under 7 or under. Conditioning really starts to take effect after that. But in those early years, if you just let them be kids, just leave them alone. Control is the worst thing that we've ever invented in this world. Try to make somebody be like me or make them do what I want to do, and you're so controlled all day long at your work or wherever.
Our
with
education
your family.
system is doing that daily to kids, so it's probably another reason why until about 7 they're okay.
Yeah.
And then they start having to go to school and get controlled and told.
Yeah.
And, you know,
And then they
7-year-old
gotta
boys
come
are told
home.
they got to sit still for hours on end, and there's no sit still in a damn 7-year-old little boy, you know.
Yeah.
Not if he's got a spirit, you know, if he hasn't been stepped on yet.
And then dad's at work all day and he's being controlled by the man, and then he comes home and who's he get to control? Those kids.
Yeah.
He gets to pass that on, and we're just constantly fucking them up.
Yeah.
And all we have to do is just take a step back and realize that we're not the teachers. In a spiritual world, we are the students. We are the ones that are disconnected and broken. They're the ones that are whole. So we need to flip the script and start learning from them. And it's just by watching what they do, watching how simple it is to be free. It's really simple, but we have been controlled so long that we make it so hard. Even I do.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I catch myself. You know, another one of them awareness things of catching myself. Bill says it make a tough going at life, or make a hard going at life, or I can't remember exactly how he puts it, but look it up. And I catch myself doing that. You know, you said something there when the kids come in here. I don't know why I'm processing this, but I'm gonna talk about it. So, like, the baby gets sit here, and he looks at you. He don't really know you, man. He might remember you from that one time, maybe. That's hard to say. But mom's standing here, right? And you said, don't walk off, you know. So baby gets a minute to go. And he gets say, you know, that signals are being sent that he's okay, right?
Yeah.
That everything's okay. And then the little boys bring their energy over here and say, look, everything's okay, right?
Yeah.
They play with you, they monkey with you, whatever, you know, and
Right.
show you. And the little baby picks up on that energy, and, you know, he's saying, okay, my antennas are saying, mom's okay. These two brothers, they're okay here. Then I can be okay here, you know, and you know, I know you said he was laughing as soon as he come up out of the thing. Kind of thought about that. Maybe he realized his privates weren't hurting for the first time in a few years.
Right.
It made him really happy.
Yeah.
That cycle you're talking about is to be similar to finding that secret where you can smoke pot and be happy, joyous, and free.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no answer for this. This is hypothetical questioning, whatever. But how do we, like, because that is, it seems to me, is that broken cycle that we have done. And I see elements in our society where we actually, like I said, education. I know that we got to do learning. There needs to be education, right? I'm not saying there doesn't need to be education. But the way we're doing it appears to me to be doing it in a way that fits some lifestyle 50, 60, 70 years ago, when we were trying to fill factories with workers and teach people to come out of school and then go sit over here and run this sewing machine all day, or run this hubcap maker all day, or, you know, we were training people to do that. And I think it's finally kind of paid its, we're paying the toll for that now after a while, because Dad's burning up his entire gigabyte of energy doing that crappy ass job all day long. So when he gets home, besides the fact now he's bringing this control monkey on his back that he's had on him all day long, he's also out of juice, you know. And he comes home and he's got nothing to pour. You know, it's pouring from an empty cup by the time he gets off of work. Mom's been home all day. Let's just say, because that don't happen real often anymore. Usually they're both gone off to work, and the kids are in some kennel someplace being kept for the day, which is also not pouring love in them kids, or I shouldn't say that. I'm sure some of them are, but they can't possibly. God would have us pop out 8, 10 babies at a time if he thought we could handle it. You know, puppies do. We only get them one at a time because that's all we can freaking handle at a time, man. Maybe 2 in the occasional. And the only time they get to be more than that is when it's artificial. When we've gone in there and monkey with something like in vitros and stuff like that. My mom's home with a few kids all day, and she's also worn out because she's been conditioned. Even if she's able to let the kids play, she can't really do. Human beings can't seem to do that anymore. So then Dad comes home, and Mom's out of gigabytes. Mom's out of gigabytes, and now we got the rest of the evening, and we're supposed to make something productive out of that family unit. And I don't know how to make that stuff. And not that it's up to me to come up with a solution, but I continually get this message about how I've always said it in a way is that as kids grow, we step on their spirits. I told a guy the other day, I said, trying to get him to understand this concepts we're talking about, that, if I could get your spirit out of you, if I could get it out of you and lay it down here on the ground and we could look at it, you'd see all these big boot stomps in it. It's been stepped on by this and stepped in, and that stuff it's like that memory foam stuff or whatever, you put a boot print in it, it stays in there for a long time. Yeah. And it is repairable, but that's exactly what this program is built to do, is to repair this stepped on spirit that we get. So we get these little kids, and then we start stepping on their spirit, and by more than likely already damaged parents, right? The parents are already, because I didn't get this until I was 45. And most of the people I watch coming in getting 12-step help are 35, 40 years old. Rarely, you do have some come in a little early. And most of them are already raising families and stuff. So they're stepped on their kids. I stepped on my kids' spirits before I ever came to recovery. And that memory foam still trying to help do what I can. My healing helps them heal, and I have no doubt about that. But how to stop that cycle of us stepping on little kids' spirits? They grow up with stepped on spirits. They go to unhealthy stuff, whether it's using substances or behaviors or drive for success, or they wind themselves into the world. They get the world pulled down over their eyes. Is that what you said? From the Matrix movie? Yeah. They get the world pulled down over their eyes, and then they finally, if they're lucky, like me or you, some life event happens that causes us to wake up and decide something's got to be different. But by the time I hit the wall and it had that, I'd already done that damage on those kids. We've got to have a generation of them come up without the damage. And maybe that will happen. Maybe that's a natural turn of events. Everything in the world has these cycles and these, like I said a minute ago about the education system that was set up to do what it does today. I think it's playing out now. I think that's beginning to play out to the end, because to a big extent, the upstream cycles are not looking for those kind of individuals anymore. There's not that much manufacturing and that kind of stuff going on in this country anymore. It's all moved offshore. I don't know where I'm going with all that, other than I like to think about it and I like to process it. And over again, I hear this same thing about this stepping on these child's spirits. And maybe somebody listening to you that's just had a kid and they heard that, and there'll be one of that generation that's not getting stepped on, And then when we go around talking and carrying our message like this, because we really don't, this is not 12-step talk. You don't hear this. You don't hear this in a meeting. You hear this when you and I get together, or when me and Chris get together, or when our people, I would like to hope that other 12-step, other people who have had this spiritual development that we've been blessed to receive, I would like to think that's everywhere. I'm not so sure, because I do know and this AA saved my life. But AA ain't the most healthy grounds I ever stepped foot on either. We somehow or another, I feel, and this is where I get in trouble a little bit, somehow or another have been fortunate enough to receive this extra dose of this. Yeah. There's something going on that when I travel around recovery communities, I don't find this anywhere else really. You might find a dude here and there, but you don't find a pod of it like what we have.
Well, it's what we're talking about is 100% out of the big book. There is a part in there where it says, talking about the tools that we use and giving back, but he says a much more important demonstration of these principles are in our respective homes and businesses.
Occupations and family.
Yeah, so it's right there in the big book. It's more important to demonstrate this to your kids and be loving, patient, and tolerant with your kids and your family.
It's a really good point. Really good point.
It's so that's true recovery. It's not. I remember this guy told me one time, and I'll never forget. He said, anybody can be spiritual in an AA meeting.
Yeah.
If you can't be spiritual in an AA meeting, something's wrong with you. But can you take these tools out there to people who you have abused, to people you have neglected and beat down with your words? Can you repair that and then continually lift that up and continually repair it? Because, like the lady we were talking tonight, she said she, has been going through this for 20 years. Mm-hmm. It's not healed overnight. We have to continually, we talk about living amends, we have to continually make amends to these people, but not being the asshole that we used to be. And we have to continually be a good example for our kids. I wasn't a good father, but I'm the best grandfather I can be, and my son appreciates that just as much as of me making amends. It's me continually to be there for his kids.
I wish I could find out exact wording. I know what it is approximately, and I can't. A lot of times I can find something really quick in here. And nowadays I lean on my phone too much because I can search for a word.
You were talking about AA. There's different, I think you were talking about the AA fellowship, but AA is the name of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. That is AA. The book is AA. The fellowship, that's flawed because that's human. But that book was, in my opinion, divinely written, or written from a person who was able to connect and get those words from somewhere else. But that's recovery. The big book and this pod you're talking about, we have been taught to practice all of it. You don't just practice some of it. You don't do,
It's taught. It's not a la carte. You don't get to pick which ones I'm going to do.
You don't get to add steps to it, like you said. You don't get a 13th step or a 14th step because you're going to screw up the cake recipe, like you were talking about.
Yeah. And I still like to, whenever I hear the 13th step, somebody, again, it's reprogramming. To some extent, that's what's happened to me. I've been reprogrammed. My old program has been slowly dissolved, and a new program put in its place. And I have a little personal mission to do that same thing with the 13th step, because it's got that, most people know it as the what I would say is a negative connotation.
Right.
But I heard a speaker once say, no, the 13th step is dying sober.
Cool.
And I like that a lot better. And again, it's kind of like this thing about looking into the future and what I put out. The energy you put out into the world is the energy that comes back to you. Yeah. There's absolutely no doubt in that. And so I try to practice that principle in my own world too. So anytime I hear, it's kind of like when somebody says I have to do something. I have to go pick up my kids in a little bit. It's automatic in me, man. I go, get to.
Yeah.
You get to.
Yeah.
And the same thing when I hear somebody say something about the 13th step, I like to interject that new definition.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Rather than propagate the old one.
the steps all you want. That's step 11. Is you add 2.
That is the add 2 step.
You add 2 as much as you want, and my recovery would be very stale if I didn't add to it all the time.
Yeah, me too. Because once you're through with the work, what do you do now?
Yeah,
you had to do something. Add to was something one of my early teachers hit me with, and it ended up that word. I ended up getting quoted in the 11th step. I got a paragraph in the PSSR book about a certain beloved's fancy, and my thirst for adding things to my recovery, like Mankind Project and the yoga teacher training, and continue to do things like that, which I believe is exactly what Bill was talking about when he says continue to
improve our conscious contact.
Improve my conscious contact. I believe all those things fit in that category. I think my woodworking fits in that category.
Absolutely.
And I found a new thing here lately of hand cutting dovetails.
Yeah.
There's a little dovetail shape, and then you make a notch that fits that.
Yeah.
And you make these corners come together with no need for glue or anything, and they're stronger than glue. They're mechanically intact and interlocked. And hand cutting dovetails will improve your conscious contact with your higher power, with the God of your understanding, doing that.
Yeah, those 2 words, conscious contact, you can't do that in the future. You can't do that if you're afraid. You can't connect. You
can't gonna do that.
Right.
You got to do it.
Yeah. So I like consciously connecting to people. So, and I do that through listening. If I listen to the person, even if they're talking about stuff I could care less about it, they care about it. They want to be heard. Here's the thing. You've always heard, I've been wanting to say this for a long time, and I'm glad that I get to say it on the podcast. You've always heard the phrase, everybody's heard the phrase, the way to a man's heart through his stomach. That's not technically true. It's about 6 or 7 inches lower than the stomach. That's the way through a man's heart. But the way to a woman's heart is through your heart. And you do that through your ears. Connect, listen. They want to be heard. They're home all day with the kids, and they want to be heard. And not just women, everybody wants to be heard. Does. So if you can be a listener, and that's what I am, and I can't tell you the amount of love that pours back to me just because I listen. Even if I'm in a meeting, I'm listening to these people and they're pouring love to me. They don't even know it. But people, when they get that relief of getting something off their chest, that gratitude pours out. And it pours out to you if you're the listener. And that's what just makes a meeting drive. And it also levels it up to, they talk about the group consciousness where there is one ultimate authority, and that's a loving God. Well, if you have a bunch of loving people, you're going to create a loving God, and it's going to have a voice all its own, and it's going to raise that meaning up to the level that we've been able to achieve in our little pod. So, and it all starts with listening. I can't stress that enough. You know that, and I'll tell this story. How I learned that was, I was having early sobriety. I was having a little tiff with my fiance, who's now my wife, and I called my sponsor, who at the time my sponsor was my nephew, and he had several years sober, and he was able to separate being a sponsor and being my family. So he was really good. It was actually harder on me because he was more strict than a regular sponsor would be. But I called him and I didn't get him. I got his wife, and so she said he's busy. So she said, "Can I help you?" So I just told her the story, and it was about listening. And she said, or I told her the story, I can't remember exactly what it was about, but she said, well, what if your sponsees called you with the same thing? I said, well, I'd listen to them. And she said, well, what makes you think that won't work with her? So I had to try. There was a lot of guilt involved in this, because I had harmed her so much. I just wanted her to be better, like I was getting better. So I would start to listen, and within a couple of minutes, that fix-it mode would kick in, and I'd be telling her, you need to do this, this, and this, and this. I even went so far as you need to stop Catholicism and start practicing yoga and mindfulness and stuff like that. And that didn't go over too well. So one day she calls me. She's having a really bad day at work, and she said, I'm having a bad day. I just need you to listen. So I'm like, all right, God, here's my chance. Keep my mouth shut. And so I did it. And it felt like she talked for like an hour, but it was more like 5 minutes. And at the end of it, she said, this is the best conversation we've ever had. And I didn't say a fucking word. And that's when I realized that people just need to get it out. The answers are inside. I was taught this early on. Emotions, you think of it as energy and motion. So an emotion is information behind energy. So there's energy that comes through the body, and it needs to flow through your body. And if you can let it flow through your body, then you can pick up the information. What happens is we don't like uncomfortable emotions and uncomfortable feelings, so we stuff them. So we don't feel the energy, so we never get the information. So when someone is allowed to speak out the problem, they are able to access the information, so they've already got the solution. They just have to get the energy out in order to find the solution. So that's number one thing when people say, how do you pick a sponsor? Get somebody that'll listen. Get somebody that's not like your parents. If your parents didn't listen, then don't get them. If they did listen, that's fine. I don't care if it's a man, woman, child, baby, dog, anything. A dog's probably the best sponsor in the world, because a dog will listen, won't say a fucking thing. But if you need a human, absolutely need a human, pick somebody that'll listen to you and let you get it out. And then when they speak, you want somebody that's going to speak from their heart, and you'll learn to trust them. And I'm running out of shit to say.
Yeah.
So
I know. I get on a roll, and then I feel like I just hit a road bump, and I just lose my train of thought after a minute. I know it ain't exactly parallel because you interjected the word heart, and I believe that, and I heard what you said. But like the way to a person's heart is through your own ears.
Yeah.
And I as we talked about the gal over and over again who's been here today, that fix-it switch still gets flipped at me. And I don't know, there's some things that I wonder that will never get turned off. And I think that's the case, well, what I got to do is override that. Because one thing happens when my fix-it switch gets thrown in my head, and then I'm starting to think instead of listen.
Yeah.
And that's felt,
yes.
And I know it when I'm talking to somebody too. I had a recent sponsee who I could tell when I'm trying to transmit this stuff to him and get him to understand some of these concepts, and that when I'm talking to him, he's completely not there. He's completely thinking about what the next thing he's going to say is. And he would prove it out sometimes, because he would completely say something like not even in context with what we're talking about,
right.
And he's been up in his head the whole time, and I'm thinking, I just poured out all this good shit to this
right.
dude, and he didn't hear a word of it. And I called him out on it too, and said, look, man, trying to help you, but you got to somehow or another override that thing that's making you think about what you're going to say next.
Right.
And that is one of our big problems. We do that. We're instead of listening, we're formulating what we're going to say, and that's that self-centeredness.
Yep.
Me,
exactly.
me. That's, let's say, people singing that song. It's been sung. I've heard it on Looney Tunes, I think, the first time. Me. Remember when Bugs did that with the opera stuff?
Yeah.
But like with the lady that was here, my fix-it switch is getting thrown, and I gotta like consciously override it.
Yep.
In the same way, and maybe it will go away. I know it's getting better. It's getting better. It's not as hard to override. It's easier to see that I'm doing that, and it's also easier to comprehend. I'm less self-centered or selfish and self-centered in the way that today I know I can't fix her problem. And there's really not much I can give her to do that. No words are going to come out of Dan's mouth that's going to solve that girl's problem. So just S the F up.
Well, it's all about you can't fix them because they're not broken. They're suffering.
Yeah.
And
I can't resolve their issue.
Yeah, because I had the same thing. I was wanting to say some things. I even said a few things, and she immediately talked over me, which is her way of saying, just listen to me. You're doing a good job. Yeah. Here's your pat on the back. Now just listen to me. And that's what I have to constantly remind myself is my job here is for them to suffer less. And the more that they can get out, the more, the better they're going to feel. And
she probably skipped down the hallway.
Yeah. I could see the change. I could feel the change in her. And that's the thing with the sponsees that want to respond is they got so much they want to say, they've never been able to say it, and
they've never been heard.
Yeah, so that's why I like to always, before I start anything, because I don't like to waste my breath, is I'll listen. What do you got? You got anything else?
Yeah, I do that too.
And I can feel it. They'll say, no, I'm good. And I'm like, no, you're not. Keep talking. There's something in there. And so I'll go to start talking, and boom, they'll start talking again. And but I let them talk themselves out, and then I'm able to teach.
Yeah. I learned that, when I start a session, when we sit down, I go, well, what do you got you want to talk about? Because there's no sense in getting into this shit until we've heard you a little bit anyway, because something is going on. There's always something going on. Yeah. I learned to listen from you.
Right.
I did.
Thank you.
Early on talking, I remember one of my very first lessons is that I was really having trouble with people's shares. I couldn't, it's just like drive me nuts, I wanted to throw tomatoes at them and shit.
Yeah.
And, and it wasn't everybody, it was just certain people.
Yeah.
And you talked to me about looking at them. It said something to me about that, and I remembered about making eye contact with them, focus on them, and listen for what they got, because maybe there's 90% of bullshit coming out, but there might be a 10% little chunk that they say is good shit that you need to hear. Yep. So listen for that, Right. And I started adjusting my posture in meetings and stuff, and if somebody behind me was talking, I would shift my body around, and I still like to do that. Zoom kind of fucked that up a little bit. Face to face, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
That whoever is sharing, I can focus my attention on that person.
Yeah.
It resolves a whole bunch of stuff. It keeps me from getting fucked with by the guy next to me that wants to jack around in the meeting, and tap on your leg and cry with the peanut gallery behind the. Because if you don't pay them no attention, they won't.
Right.
They won't bug you usually.
Yeah.
And I'm also not seeing these other peripheral reactions. That's another thing I could tend to do is look around the room and see what that guy think. Look in his face and see what he's thinking about what that dude is sharing. And, I found these things. I was doing that, so that keeping my attention on the speaker was resolving most of my inattention, and I could focus on that and listen for that little bit. And I wasn't real sure at times. I go, I don't know, 10% was supposed to be good in that, but I didn't hear it. But it didn't matter. It was the practice of it and learning to begin to listen, and it was the catalyst that taught. I'd hear you speak about listening, so I would constantly get doses of how to do that effectively. Got a door knocker.
The one thing I found about listening is I really don't need to respond. Think of what I'm going to say, because almost 100% of the time, there might be a few times that I don't have the answer, that it doesn't come to me, and those are the times I'm not listening very well. But almost every time there's something that happens between connecting to the person that you're listening to that I don't know if I'm reading I don't think I'm reading their mind, but I'm picking up on something, and something comes into my mind, and you should say this. And I can take that and push it to the side and put a little bullet point by it and just have that there, and then go back to listening. And if they say something else, I'll put that up to the side, and then when they're done talking, and I'll feel it, and they'll usually say, I'm done. And that's when I go back to my bullet point list. And if I can't remember it, it probably wasn't important anyway. But there's usually something that comes, some kind of magic that gives me an answer, and it's usually something off the wall that I normally wouldn't say, and I'll say it, and it'll trigger something in them, and they'll even share more, or it'll be the answer I never thought about that, So we don't have to have the answers. We just have to listen and let the universe work through us.
Yep. That's a similar thing what we're doing here in this conversation. You'll say something and I put it up here, and if I don't remember to come back to it, then it wasn't that important anyway. And the important ones I remember to talk about, just like that one. It's another one of these, like, I goof around because Christopher writes books, and I joke around about writing books, and like one of them, what keeps on hitting me is these 12, and I don't know why 12, I just doing 12 because we got 12 of these and 12 of those and 12 of these. 12 myths of recovery. Stuff about like I'm not hurting anybody but myself. AA won't work for me. And I will never have any more fun.
Yeah.
But there's also other things, but people, these teachings none of this is new. I like to get in my head once in a while and think I'm hit on some key that I need to be like out teaching or something, And some of that's the truth, but the fact is that there's 1,000 teachers out there teaching this stuff right now in different languages and different dialects, not like French and Spanish. I'm just talking about like the difference between. Hell, probably there's a difference. There's a difference between the way 12-step speak is spoken here, and if you go to an out-of-town meeting, it's a little different.
Right.
Same message, but it's spoken a little different. But definitely, up in the top of that list, some places learn how to listen. Because I can't tell you how many. I don't know. I keep on running into places where. I try to dance around that a little bit, where. That's the downfall in between two human beings trying to interact successfully with one another, is the fact that nobody's listening. Neither party's listening to the other one. There's a thing about not feeling heard. That's like a core thing in us, right? I think, I'm putting this out here in a way that I don't know, but I believe that females have that in a deeper regard than men do, about needing to be heard. There's a thing in there where they need to feel like they're being heard, and dudes seem to have a real problem listening. and it can end up being like major league, where you think it's kind of like I giggle today about people having trouble meditating. So what you're telling me is you have a problem just sitting there doing nothing, huh? That ought to be the easiest thing in the world. It really ought to be, right?
Right.
If I ask you to go over and do 50 push-ups, you might say, damn, that's hard. But if I'm just asking you to sit there for 15 minutes and do nothing, then you say that, no, I can't do that. It's hard. It's a simple thing. Right. And listening is a similar kind of thing. Listening's way more effective if I actually use it in the way that you're talking about, where I'm actually taking in the energy. And there's times when I'm thinking to say something to this person, like hand them this piece of knowledge, and they circle around to it, and they get it themselves. You almost wonder if there was some transmitting going on or no, but that they'll come around to that stuff, like you said, that people find their answers. Yeah. But you can listen effectively and not hear anything either.
Yeah.
I mean, just for practicing, just sit and listen.
Yeah.
And they don't know that you weren't listening.
Right.
Pretend like you're listening.
Right.
And it'll come to you. You'll get better at it. But at the beginning, just like meditating, just sit there and do nothing for a little while. If you practice that, you'll get better at it. And if you sit there and you try to listen to people,
yeah,
you'll get better at it.
Don't do that with your wife, though, because then they're going to ask you, what did I just say?
Yeah, but you got to practice, and you got to start somewhere, right?
Well, that's why I say the AA fellowship is your proving ground. That's
give you a place to practice.
Yeah, because you're not feeling guilty because you haven't done anything to them, and B, you're talking about something that you have in common. You're not talking about soap operas. You know, what soap opera your wife watched that day. You don't care about that, but you do care about what this person done to get sober, or how they're struggling, and I've struggled with that too. Yep. So you have that common ground where you can learn how to use the tools. I did want to talk about this concept of God. Go to your nearest 3-year-old that can talk a little bit, maybe 4 years old, and ask them, what's God? And I did this with my grandson. He was like 3 or 4. Must have been 4 because I don't think he talked so well at 3. I said, do you know what God is? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what is it? He's like, tell me. It's a word. What they know as God, that we would call God, is a feeling. It's not a word. That's what we use to tell each other, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And it's nothing to do with knowledge at all. It's a feeling. And these kids are showing us every single day that this is how you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to be free. You're supposed to be comfortable in your own skin. And, you know, that's what Jesus taught. That's what Buddha taught. That's what Lao Tzu taught. And all of them. It's about being compassionate. The Dalai Lama, they asked him, what's the word that you use for God? And he said, thought for a second, and then he said compassion. And that's God. And compassion, to me, that is my heart going out to you. That's compassion. And so that's also connecting. You know, the two hearts connecting forms God. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. And then we're forming a bigger God, because every person that listens to this podcast from here to infinity is going to add to that, and we're going to multiply and multiply and multiply. So that's why by the time this gets 6 or 8, 10 months down the road, it's going to be more powerful than when we started, because people are going to pour their energy into it, and that's what AA has made AA as powerful as it is. But this little thing that we're doing, I don't think it's been 6 years, maybe 7. I don't know how long we did Spiritual Underground, to be honest. I think it's
Saturday
7.
morning. I will be 7 years sober.
Okay.
It's a little older than me.
Well, happy 7 years, man. That's awesome.
So I know it was cooking when I got there.
Yeah. So it started around,
I think it's a year or so before me.
Yeah.
I think, if I remember right.
So we should have about 7 years. I don't think it was a year before you know.
Oh yeah.
You came at the ground level.
You know, there was this core thing of individuals going.
You were in the basement meetings, though.
No, once. And it was only because the church was closed. My first Spiritual Underground
okay. So maybe
was at Brian's basement because, you know, like I said, you remember
maybe
George, right?
I know it started. Oh yeah.
Do you remember George?
Yeah, I remember George.
Yeah.
I miss George.
Me too.
Maybe we're going on 8 then.
I think
we just hit 8.
Because it was about this. It was sometime.
It was December.
I really don't know. All I know is
December.
that Brian's house was decorated in Christmas.
Yep.
You know, and I was too fogged up to memorize stuff exactly, but I do remember it was before Christmas.
Yeah.
The house was decked out. The yard was decked out, and
I think we started in the church in December.
And I was pretending to be sober because I wasn't sober yet, man.
Yeah.
I come to Spiritual Underground for a couple months.
Oh, really?
Not sober. Doing that dance where I was telling everybody I'm fine, cool,
Yeah.
and didn't tell anybody about the trouble I was in. I just kind of come in and took the back row sobriety and soaked it in and chatted a little bit and boogied.
Yeah.
And then I had the night of the burning desire, where I finally ended up puking up my truth. And that was the night Christopher come up and said he wanted to sponsor me, and my life changed.
You know how rare that is for him to offer to sponsor somebody.
I didn't know it at the time.
That's like hitting the lottery almost.
Well, I can still remember y'all were sitting in Brian's basement. I can almost tell you where a bunch of people were sitting. I know Fred was next to me. Eddie was next to Fred. Across from me was a guy named Tim. You and Brian, you and Christopher and Brian were sitting at a table against the wall over kind of by where the steps come down. And I remember hearing you share, and I remember hearing Christopher share, and I started hearing like this sharing on a level that I had not heard before, or whatever. It was getting in a different crack or something. And it definitely was like, this is different, and it made me want to come back, because it took forever for George to talk me into coming. He'd been telling me for 6 months I should come to this meeting. And then I had a revelation. You know what a revelation is, right?
Yeah.
It's when you've been telling me something for 6 months and all of a sudden I had the idea I should do it. That's a Scott Lee joke too. And then I had the idea that I should go, and just that's so cliche around us, right? It's only a good idea until it's my idea, right?
Right.
We tell you to work these steps, and they don't do it, and then someday they have this great idea that, you know what I think I'm going to do, man? I'm going to work these steps. And I was hurting, and a thing I was doing on Tuesday nights had dissolved, and I went to George, and I remember, I didn't want to do it, but for whatever reason I did, and I walked up to him at work, and I said, hey man, is that Tuesday meeting still going on? I said, are you still going to that Tuesday meeting? Is it tonight? And he looked at me and he said, yeah, man. You could see he was excited that I was interested. And I just saw him fold up like I thought maybe he wasn't going or it wasn't happening tonight. And he goes, yeah, man, but it's not at the church. It's in some dude's basement. And I remember feeling it flush down off of me like, oh, man. And but I didn't act that way, but I can remember my countenance collapsing. And I was like, well, can I still go? And he said, yeah, man. And I don't know why that's in my memory so bad. It's because it was. I know why it is. It's because after the fact I remember the importance of that question.
Right.
And where it ended up leading me. And then I come around for a while, and I could keep on hearing you and Christopher. And I tell when I tell my story that I'd already picked out Christopher for my sponsor. And I watch every week, and it says, everybody willing, able to sponsor a guy through the 12 steps, raise your hand. He would just sit there. I'm like, God dang, this dude don't ever sponsor anybody. And I started looking around for who else. And to be honest, the two people that was on the top was you and Mike Jones. For whatever reason, those were two of the people who I was thinking about asking to sponsor me, because I had the idea that I should get a sponsor and work these steps. I've been around AA for 5 years. And then that happened, and Christopher walked up to me and told me that he would like to sponsor me. But he saw that level of pain, he saw that readiness. And knew that dude over there is ready.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, I think it's more important to ask. So that I'm not a big fan of the raising hands unless I need it, but there's me being selfish though. I need you for me, and that's not it. That's not what sponsorship's about. And I talk to this all the time to guys who are scared. I recently talked about to one of my guys about switching to somebody else, and he was, he was all in his head about it, and I'm like, look, man, sponsorship is about you. It's all about you. It has nothing to do with the other guy. If he has a problem with you leaving, I've talked to a couple of guys recently about, and a woman recently about switching, and I'm like, it's not about them. Do they have a sponsor? Yes. Well, if they have a problem and they get their feelings hurt, then they're being selfish and self-centered, and they need to talk to their own sponsor about it. That's their shit. Your life is in your hands, And you need to think about you when it comes to picking a sponsor, not somebody that you're going to be a servant to and all this other bullshit. It's about the sponsee. Whatever I can do to help them stay sober, and if that's letting them go to somebody else that they need to work with, or that they're not using me, well, that's dangerous. I mean, I can't help you if you're not going to use me. So I'm happy to see them go to somebody else.
Yeah, the one that's got lead lines, man, and I've tried to adopt it. I pray, and it sounds funny when you first say it, but he said, I pray that my sponsees outgrow me. Yeah. And that doesn't mean surpass me, right, although they can, and I hope they do. Right. It's nothing to do with the level thing. I hope that I empty out enough that they need to go someplace else and grow. Right. Because they're only going to get so much from me. Right. You know, there's a limit to me. And I hope that they decide that they want to keep going and pick somebody else. Doesn't mean that when the dude you've been sponsoring for 4 years calls you up and tells you, hey man, I want to change sponsors, that you don't take that little emotional hit. I'm still human. Right. And what do? Cheer him on just like I told him. Good, great, glad you are. Think you should. Then I call my sponsor.
Well, I mean, I've got no plans on changing sponsors, but
me neither. I really can't imagine doing it.
I do have this core value of always being a teacher and always being teachable. Mm-hmm. So I can find teachers all over the place, not just in AA. Right. Most of my teachers are spiritual-based teachers. Yep. But you know, who says that you have to physically talk to them? You can read books, watch videos, and learn new techniques in step 11, and continue to grow and be taught.
Yeah, with what we have available to us today, there's never been a better time to learn than there is today. Yep. It's everywhere, and a million teachers out there that got good stuff to teach.
Well, if you like me and you like what you're hearing, I'll tell you the resources is the main book that I used was the Tao Te Ching, and there's a copy by Wayne Dyer called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. He breaks it down. They're verses, almost like biblical verses, but they're verses and Eastern philosophy. And he wrote this book, and he breaks it down and shows you how to practice it. So that's one book. That's the main book that I use. The other guy, I'm not a Buddhist. There's too much to learn about Buddhism, and I'm not interested in that. But there's a Buddhist monk named Thich Nhat Hanh, and that's ThichNahthan. YouTube this guy. He's got tons of videos and books. That's pretty much the compassionate listening and gentle speech. That's a Buddhist practice, and that's what I've been talking about all night is compassionate listening and gentle speech. And you'll be a better friend, you'll be a better husband, you'll be a better father, you'll be a better family member if you practice compassionate listening and gentle speech. All right, there's my plug for the year. Yeah. And Christopher's book, 12 Steps Spiritual Recovery.
You say that, I don't know why, but I got struck. Like, I feel like I'm a pretty good listener, but I know, like I said, times my speech comes out harsher than I intend it for, with the passion that I have behind it. That's interesting. Did you say what kind of speech? Gentle.
Gentle.
Yeah, I don't think I speak gently.
Yeah.
No big deal. It just when you say things, I flip some switches and it makes me think. Well, those are two really good teachers, no doubt, man. I had for a while Wayne Dyer's Tao Te Ching, and he just repeated them, because they're just little one-liners. You got to get the underneath, his commentary underneath of them. Yeah, is where the value is. I mean, right. the Tao is cool, but it's kind of like saying, turn your life over to God as you understand Him. Well, that all sounds good, but there's a whole lot underneath of that.
Right.
And the same thing with every, what is one of them? It says, that which has a name, or that which can be named,
is not the true Tao. The Tao that can be named is not the true Tao.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more than just one-liners. It's verses, and they're usually a few paragraphs, but they're so dense. There's so much information in just those few words.
I've seen them written a couple times in different places where they're just that, like, opening statement thing, and page after page after page is just that without any real meat underneath of them.
No, there's a lot more to this book.
Well, I know there is.
Verses, and then he explains what they're trying to tell you.
I guess what I'm saying is you can go find a Wayne Dyer book that is the Tao Te Ching that doesn't have that underneath thing. So when you go looking for the book, make sure you find the one that's got the meat and potatoes underneath of of Wayne's commentary and his insight on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool just to listen to him recite them over and over again, but you're not really getting much out of that. Unless, I guess, I don't know, maybe it could drill in there and get
so
you.
It's like I think I know what you're talking about. It's like a meditation kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, this is the meat and potatoes is the whole, I think it's 82 verses or something like that. And then he actually took 7 different translations, the most popular ones, and then he meditated for a whole week over each one of these, each verse, and then he would write his part.
Yeah.
And so he put a lot of time into it.
There's a similar kind of thing with a yogic thing, and I can't remember what it's called, and I should, but it's been 3 or 4 years since I graduated yoga teacher training now. That there's a, dang it, and I want to look on my phone, but I'm afraid it'll mess up the recording. But it has a similar kind of approach where it has the yogic principles, much like the Tao and much like a lot of this teachings, and underneath of it are different people's interpretations. So this is Wayne's interpretation. Those writings are as old as can be, and almost probably some of them writings are kind of like biblical stuff where it's been translated so many times that we don't really have the option to go back and read the Bible as it was written, right? It's in a couple different languages and ones that aren't really supported anymore. Tao was the same way, except for it was written in characters that we would never have any idea what they said. But now we do have teachers who have peeled that open and given their interpretation. And of course, Wayne Dyer is one of the top dudes at a lot of that spiritual work.
Yeah.
But there was a yogic one too that had a similar kind of thing that we had to study in yoga teacher training.
Yeah, I found Taoism actually through one of my sponsees. I was very newly sober, not newly sober, but very newly sponsoring people. I think I had just over a year, and this guy came into my life, and he was one of those guys that bounced around quite a bit. He's been through the program before.
One of your songs that I have has that scream in the...
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of.
I think. It did. But anyway, so we start talking about God, and he starts talking about nature and the Tao Te Ching, and I'm like, not only did I say, well, you just believe what you want to believe. When he explained it to me, and I'm like, well, I like that concept of God better than the one I got. So that's the cool thing about AA is I'm allowed to change. So I adapted some of those things.
It constantly evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's what all these books, that guy actually ended up drinking himself to death right after we did our 4-step. I heard his 5th step. He drank himself to death. So something's wanting me to tell as part of that story. So I didn't hear from this guy. It was like on a Friday. And then Saturday, I had this dream. And I went over to his house, and there was a bunch of people there. And some of them I knew, some of them I didn't. But they were, a couple of them were his friends in early recovery. And he was soaking wet. And I never got the answers from his daughter because they were really tight-lipped about what happened to him. But I can almost tell you, I believe that guy died in a bathtub or something, because I don't know what the wet meant.
Wow.
But it was weird. I had it, and he had died that day, and I had that dream about him being wet, and I just had this feeling. When I woke up, I just had the feeling that something had happened, and then I found out a day later that he died, and that was like my first sponsee. And then I had another sponsee, again, preparing for the 4-step, hadn't even started it, and he just starts telling me, basically having the 5th step that day, just starts unloading all these things that he'd done, and he ended up ODing that, the next day.
Wow.
So like 2 of my sponsees died. I mean, within a few months of each other. And I remember going to aftercare and Christopher pulling me aside, and he said, this has nothing to do with you, right? And I'm like, yeah, I just did what you told me, just be available, and I was available, and actually dealt with it pretty good. But that was
to handle situations that would normally baffle you.
Yeah, that was my introduction to sponsorship. So
yeah,
I took it easy on the 4 steps for a while, but
fact is, this malady kills people, and I think it's probably responsible for most suicides at some level or another. If it's not like pure alcoholism kind of thing, whatever, this disconnectedness from God, this spiritual malady, this sick soul, stepped on spirit, kind of want to downplay it in a sense and really think it's not a big deal. Fact of the matter, it is a big deal. It's such a big deal, it causes people to kill themselves, take their own lives. And I've heard before that that's like the epitome of the self-centered, selfish, is to take your own life like that. And the fact that you've calculated nobody else's emotions in on that equation. And that's why we walk out around here carrying this message, is because those facts exist, man. Never known death like I know death today. There's not a week that goes by that I don't know somebody a degree or 2 or 3 away from me that is dead as a result of dope or booze.
Yeah.
It's not a week that goes by. It's my friend's friend's friend, or my dad. He's open with me today and knows what I do. And my buddy Charlie, and that's making that name up, found his grandson last night, overdosed and dead. It's just a regular occurrence, man. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. And it doesn't care. This guy was a published poet. He actually was a teacher. He taught poetry, and he could do things with words that I could only dream of doing. But none of that mattered once he put that whiskey in him.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me he died of a heart attack. That was the reason that they listed, but
yeah, right.
I know better than that.
Yeah, I mean, even when it's blatant, found with a needle sitting in their arm, it doesn't say that in the paper,
right?
Or I've never seen it. We like to hide this one, and why it got you.
Right.
Liver disease, car wreck, suicide.
And it might end in a heart attack, but it begins with alcohol.
Yeah, right. Yep, I get it. I know.
Yeah.
It is something. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Nope.
And that's what Darren and I are here to tell you. I always like to, when I'm working with a new guy, point out that I am spending so I could be doing a lot of things that I like to do. I'm purposely directing my energy to helping you, for free. And it's not all that generous of myself, but I know I get to keep what I got. And this book tells me I'll stay sober and I'll solve other problems in my life as a result of me doing this with you. And then we'll build this relationship, and I'll have a new friend to rock with too at the end of this thing. Because I'm real clear about that too, that I'm taking you through the steps, but honestly, I'm hoping to build a relationship with you and be a lifelong friend with you.
Yeah.
That's actually my goal. Hope you get sober. If you don't, you probably won't be on that list.
Right.
But
well,
teach people to listen, teach people to do this stuff, and hopefully someday maybe we reverse that cycle that we talked about earlier.
I've got a roommate, and it's 10 o'clock, and this is his bedtime, so I could talk for another couple hours.
I can get tired too, though.
Be respectful to him. Probably wrap it up.
Yeah, I didn't know he'd come in.
He did. I don't think he did.
Okay, I thought you said he already did.
He'll stay out until.
Oh, will he?
Yeah.
Till your company leaves?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, yeah, I don't want to make him stay out either. Any closing thoughts? Concluders?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it all.
I told Christopher in the last podcast, the guy that gave me the concluder thing, it's another podcaster, and he would go around the table and do a concluder, and I stole it. And then he quit doing it. And I noticed as I'm listening, because I listen to him every Monday morning. I mean, it's the first thing I do on Monday morning after I get done with my other normal stuff. And when I go to work, I plug in this dude's podcast. And I noticed in Monday's episode, one of his guests called him on it and said, I ain't heard you say concluder in a long time. And I brought that up to Christopher in the last podcast as concluding thoughts. So after all that circle around the block, do you have any concluders?
I do have a concluder. I wish I could quote you the way that people say it, and you might know it, but it's basically become like a child. It talks about I actually wrote a song called The Eyes of a Child, and how if I could see the world through the eyes of a child, I'd be a whole lot happier, and I'd have a whole lot more peace. In Christianity, they say something about God is like living. It comes from the heart of a child, or having the heart of a child, but be more like children and accept people for who they are. Be like a dog. Dogs will accept you unless you beat on them. They'll accept you every single time. They'll be there for you. So accept you for no matter what you do. You can pick your nose in front of them, whatever.
No matter how bad your farts stink.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't care.
And most kids, maybe the fart thing, don't notice it, but most kids will accept you. So acceptance, be like a child. Accept people. Love people without conditions. That's like a child. The child has no conditions on love. We put so many conditions on, if you don't do it this way or you don't do this, I'm not going to love you. So unconditional love, like a child. Compassion, giving, like a child. Awareness, all those things. So just observe kids rather than condition kids. That's your homework.
Maybe think of a thing. I'll conclude with this. I picked up somewhere along my travels this thing that's the 12 qualities of sponsorship, and I liked it so much I cut and pasted it, and I give it to my people in the beginning because it gives a good idea, and it has some language in there like, I cannot fix you. Don't expect me to fix you. I can't solve your problems. I won't let you sit in stuckness. I won't let you loathe in and I can't remember how it goes, something about and I may have to leave if that's where you're going to stay. I'm not going to sit with you while you don't grow, but if you continue to make the slightest effort to continue to grow, we'll be good. But the very last one, the 12th one, says, so that we can leave the childishness of man behind. And that's the one place that I always say I have some exception about that 12th one. Understand what they're saying. That I had to take it's more of a thing of taking responsibility for myself.
Right.
Rather than acting like a child. But I always clarify that, no, man, we're actually kind of aiming in some level back towards that. Child is in that photograph that TSSR tells us to go get. Then we find that picture of ourselves before our spirit was stepped on, when we still were happy, joyous, and free. And every person that ever goes looking for that picture finds it. And there's not just one, but they find a picture of themselves back when they were really happy, joyous, and free, and it touches them. And they realize that they're not there anymore, that they're all stepped on. And as we go through this work, we start emptying out that backpack of the clutter that has caused us, the boot prints that are on our spirit. We start taking those away to aim back at this. Will we ever be 3 again? No. And we won't be that happy and joyous and free either. But we aim at that. Same words that Bill used about when enlarge and perfect our spiritual life. Careful about that word perfect. It's just an aiming device. That's the trajectory and the direction we're aiming for. There's no perfect spiritual life. And the same thing with the childishness stuff. It's another dichotomy.
Well, I think that what they're referring to, the childishness, I would say the conditioning of man, because children are pretty pure, and then we can spoil the shit out of them. So the childishness, the selfishness, the spoiled brat.
They still can be that way.
Yeah. So I would say that's all conditioning, though. They're not born that way. They're made that way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But and I don't want to go too. We're done.
Yeah.
But
I got you.
Kids are some level born selfish when they don't have no way to communicate, man, and when they're hungry or cold or uncomfortable, they bitch. They cry, And the only way to stop it is to figure out which problem, because when you're a parent, that's the puzzle. Which one of these things is going to turn the off button on this kid? That's what I mean about the dichotomy. There is some innate stuff in them, but not unlike fear that sometimes keeps us alive. There's childish properties that allow the baby to survive too.
Right.
And anyway, you can beat these concepts to death, and I like trying.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank y'all for listening. Thank y'all for continuing to support the podcast. I'll throw this out here if you listen to the end. In this little thing, man, if you want to just do some jaw jacking about it, the guests haven't been coming, but I want to keep it going. And maybe this is the direction that higher power wants it to go into, or at least that's my understanding for the moment. So if you want to sign up and get together, I'm mobile. We can do it Zoom. We can come over to the wood shop and talk recovery and beat these concepts to death on purpose, because it's fun. And I'll be high when I leave here because of this.
Me too.
I had to add the third thing. I say there's always 3 things I say, or 2 things I say when I end this podcast, but I'm going to have to add the third one, because I always do that to explain why I'm doing the other 2. One of the miracles of recovery is I finally figured out that when something is not working, stop doing it. When something's working, keep doing it. So in that regard, if you're not having a blast in your recovery, I'm going to blow it. If you're not having a blast in your recovery, it's your own damn fault. And thank you all for allowing Darren and I to participate in our recoveries in this manner tonight. Peace out.
Always tried to be just who they wanted. Always tried to do everything they said. lock away all your dreams inside your head. Year after year you try to be a good girl. They never failed to point out when you were bad. Stuck to the program like a robot. Became a trophy for mom and dad. But inside you